And it's gone 6 p.m. Is there anybody in the waiting room, or can we get started, do you think? We can get started. Okay, brilliant. We've got such a busy agenda, so let's get cracking, and hopefully we'll get a good opportunity and some good discussion this evening. Good evening, everybody. I'm Wasim Zafar, the Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment at Birmingham City Council. Welcome to our meeting, the Route to Zero Community Assembly. We were hoping to be able to meet in hybrid format, but we've had to meet again online due to the government guidelines when we originally sent out the invitation. But I'm very hopeful at the next meeting, I think it's in May, we will be able to meet in hybrid. I say hybrid because I think that's the future, that's the cultural change that COVID will definitely have, that we will continue to operate in. So we will hopefully be at a venue somewhere in the city, meeting in person, but also enable people to meet online too. As requested by colleagues at the last meeting, we've got a particular focus of today's meeting. There's two key presentations, one about the natural environment and one on the waste strategy. So we will be hearing some presentations which will be done in plenary format, and then we will go into breakout rooms and have some more detailed conversations. And very importantly, we hope we will get colleagues from right across the city and beyond who are on this call contributing to those discussions. Ellie, can I hand over to you to very quickly go through the logistics of this Zoom meeting?
Yeah, thanks. So this is going to be a little bit different to anything we've done so far. So we're going to have firstly a presentation from Simon, and then after that we're going to go into some breakout rooms for the first time. And as I explained on my email, which hopefully you received, but if you didn't, don't worry too much, we're going to use Jamboard, which I'll share my screen now just to show it. I set up a general slide here, and this is the button if you want to add a comment. It doesn't save your name, so if you want to say who you are like this, and then put your comment like that, if you have any general questions. And then after that, there are a number of pages for the different breakout rooms, labelled 1, 2, and so on. And hopefully once you're in the rooms, you'll know which room you're in. And there's 2 sides to each one, question 1 and question 2. So you just hit this button here and you put your comments, thoughts, etc. below. And then we've got the same further along here in red, just to make confusion for the waste ones as well. But if you have any questions, there are.
I think the tree planting strategies
are
crucial.
Rooms who can help you.
Without trees, of course, there are no humans whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay, let me stop sharing that. Okay, I hope that's clear. But any questions, then ask facilitators in your rooms. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellie. So let's get cracking. We've got so much to get into over the next 2 hours. I'm going to go straight to Simon Needle from Birmingham City Council, our tree expert. That's not his real title, but he is. If anybody in Birmingham wants to know about anything to do with any tree in the city, Simon's the person to go to. Simon, so you got a presentation to deliver, haven't you?
I have, yeah. So I'll just hopefully put that up on the screen. That will come up now, your end?
Yep, got it.
Good.
Thanks.
That's good. Always glad when it works. I'm now going to try and make sure I scroll through. So yeah, good evening, everybody. Yes, Councillor Sfar's already mentioned, my name's Simon Needle. I work as Principal Ecologist and Arboriculturist within the planning team. So we're just going to run through a little bit really about what we're looking at doing in terms of blue and green infrastructure and trees, particularly for the city. So I sort of called this growing greener and climate adapted city. Let me see if I can advance my slides. There we go. So when you think of Birmingham, people often think of 2 things. They either think of this sort of view, so the city centre, very sort of urban, dense area with probably very little greenery, but we also have areas of the city that look like this, and this is just out in Edgbaston, so just a mile or so outside the city centre. But most people, I think, that I talk to, especially those from outside of the city, don't think of Birmingham as being particularly green overall, but we are quite a green city when we look at this. We've got a total land area of 103 square miles. We've got 13.5 square miles of public open spaces, 9 square miles of designated nature conservation sites, 5 square miles of designated woodlands, that's in the parks and open spaces, and 250 miles of rivers, brooks, streams, and of course 35 miles of canal. And those are spread across the city. And those of you who know the city fairly well will recognise some of the corridors that we've got on here along the Ray Valley, the Bourne Brook, the Cole Valley especially, that runs out through from Acox Green, Hall Green, and out through to Shard End and into Coventry. And of course, at the very top of the city, we've got Sutton Park as well. So our largest urban park at 2,500 acres. So absolutely massive piece of green space there. When we look at the canopy cover, so that's the trees that are in the city. So that's all the trees, whether they're in public or private ownership. We're actually around 18.6% canopy cover. So that's not bad. That's above the UK average. The UK average is about 12-13%, so we're doing well there. But that canopy cover is not evenly distributed across the city. So if we're looking at our ward level on here, we've got some places like Borsden Highgate, which are down as low as 9.6% canopy cover, but we've got other areas such as Sutton Trinity, which is up where Sutton Park is, which is up at 46%. And so this has an impact on how we're going to be managing, how we deal with climate change and adaptation to that. If we look at what the challenges are that we're facing, I think many of us are familiar with a lot of these. We've got a population at 1.1 million and rising, one of the youngest populations in Europe. Significant number of our wards are in the top 10 percentile for indices of multiple deprivation. So that's looking at living environment, crime, education, income, a whole series of indices there. We have high levels of years life lost in certain quarters as well because of some of these factors that are below there. So air pollution, urban heat island, those all add stresses to people's well-being, so that can have a serious impact on their health and well-being and longevity. We've got areas of the city that are subject to pluvial and fluvial flooding. So there's a technical term. So that's water that's coming out of rivers and streams, but also water that's flowing over land. So stuff that's not percolating into the ground. We have a high demand for housing as well. So we're looking at space to put these in. And on top of all that, we've got the ecological crisis going on. So decreases in biodiversity, collapses of ecosystems. So these are things that support and provide natural climate regulation. So if we're losing some of the lower level of biodiversity, those that are helping break down wood and biomass and turning that into soil, we're sort of losing some of that supporting system. And of course, some of the climate change issues as well are leading to increases in non-native pests and diseases. And this is something that's really important when we're considering about how we manage the natural environment in the city. And we can't, of course, miss out the fact that the last 2 years, obviously, we've been going through this COVID-19 pandemic, and that's really brought to the fore the inequity, I suppose, in accessible green space. We were all encouraged to sort of try and take our, an hour's exercise each day. But for some people in the city, that was really difficult because they might not necessarily have a good outdoor space of their own, and access to, or easy access to, green space was probably limited, and what was the quality of that green space. And we know sort of historically and from the data that we have that minority groups have been slightly more impacted, or been more impacted by the pandemic. And of course that we've got higher levels of minority groups in areas of low green infrastructure, so that's GI, and poor air quality and high urban heat time. So they are adversely impacted by all these measures. The two photos that we've got there, or two pictures we've got there, one is the urban heat island for 2006. So the red is the area where there was a higher than average temperature. So this is overnight temperatures. And then the other map is where we've overlaid a number of the indices of multiple deprivation with the urban heat island and the provision of things like ecosystem services. That's the climate regulation, the water infiltration, the air cooling that green infrastructure provides. If we look at the sorts of benefits that green infrastructure can provide, these are two, I thought, quite useful diagrams, and we can look at how this is being used at a city-wide scale and also at a local scale as well, so looking at street level. So looking at incorporating good quality and well-connected green infrastructure and blue infrastructure through a city helps with air quality regulation. So it's helping absorb particulate matter, it's creating disruption to airflow, so therefore dispersing those particulate matters. It helps mitigate heat stress that we feel. So the urban cooling, the transpiration from plants provides that cooling effect. Noise reduction, obviously if we've got a green environment, we're probably more likely to look at the mode shift that we want, moving to more forms of active travel. So if we've got a green environment through which to move through, that's good. The green infrastructure also helps water quantity regulation as well. We know that trees are good interceptors of stormwater, and that where they are, we've got areas of soft landscape and lots of trees that water infiltrates this ground more readily and in large quantities than where we've got either more hard surface but permeable surfacing and where we've got impermeable surfaces. And the same holds true then down to a street level as well. You know, if we're being able to create streets that have good quality air, we're managing the heat stress at a local level, noise reduction, you're going to hopefully increase levels of physical activity as well. So you can see that the green infrastructure covers a whole range of things. And the knock-on effects of this is if we're improving social interaction, if we're reducing stress, if we're able to increase physical activity, if we're able to deal with some of the impacts of flooding, then we're hopefully going to improve people's well-being, we'll reduce their stress, we'll increase their longevity, and we'll also decrease the impacts on the NHS, which is obviously, you know, inundated with people at the moment with varying issues. This is an example of some green infrastructure. This isn't from Birmingham, I have to say. This is actually from Grangetown in Cardiff. But this is a sort of an exemplar site that's been shown as a re-greening of a street, incorporating what we would term multifunctional green infrastructure. So this is, the street has been greened, it's had vegetation put in it, but these planting areas here actually act as a SUD system, so sustainable urban drainage. So they're taking surface water, they're storing it under the ground, that's then watering the plants or stored to water the plants. Excess is then fed away into the streams, but slowly. The plants are providing a green environment, so again, you know, improving people's health and well-being. The trees and the other plants are also providing transpiration, so cooling that environment. And again, if we pick the species appropriately, we can increase biodiversity as well. These makes these places good for birds and other wildlife as well to live. So this is the sort of thing that we should be seeing, you know, we should be trying to incorporate into our new developments and also retrofit into the city. And this is the direction that we're seeing things like the National Planning Policy Framework going, trying to encourage more of this type of intervention. Just coming on to trees, now this is one of the questions that this is going to cover one of the questions that we're going to ask in a minute. So we've recently produced an urban forest master plan for Birmingham, and this is producing a vision for the management of that urban forest. So that's all the trees again in public and private ownership between now and 2051. We know that in order to have a well climate adapted city, we need to be looking at around 25% to 30% canopy cover. And like I said, we're already at 18%. So we know we need to increase that. And we've also said we've got impacts from pests and diseases. This is just a view of only the street trees in the city. So just over 73,000 street trees. And there's a bit of a breakdown there of the species that we've got. Now, the pests and diseases that we've got coming over might impact a particular tree species or a particular group. So if we were to plant lots and lots of trees of all of the same type, we risk losing all those in one go if we get a really bad pest or disease. So those of you who are old enough will remember Dutch elm, when that came over, wiped out virtually the entire population of elms. We've got ash dieback at the moment. There are other things on the horizon. So we're looking to build in resilience to our tree stock to ensure that we've got longevity. And some of these are also going to be prone to heat stresses as well. So we might lose these through changes in climate. So we need to build in tolerance to climate change as well. So we're having to look at diversifying species. So down in London, they're now able to plant lemon trees on their streets because they don't have any frosts in those areas. So there's some subtle changes going on there. Then when we're thinking about how we're going to deliver these ecosystem services and these benefits to people, we can start looking at how we can use all that data, layering it up to help us prioritize where we need to be acting. And this is what I suppose we could term a tree equity map. Now we've taken the canopy cover as it stands at the moment, so we know where we've got high and low canopy. Then overlaid onto that, we've got all those indices of multiple deprivation, and we've broken this down to the lowest super output areas in the city. So that's neighborhood level, that's areas of about 1,500 people, 650 households. So there are 639 LOSAs across the city. And this data has allowed us to, I suppose, rank by heat map those areas that are in most need. This platform here is actually one that our local tree warden group have procured, and we're using it with them as a city. We've partnered with them, and we're able to dial in various things to show how we should prioritize where we're working. So on this here, we have a series of sliders down the side, and we can prioritize any one of these for consideration, what we might want to tackle. So here I've just simply put on air quality, urban heat island, stormwater reduction. So, and that's how we've come up with these areas here. So the ones that are darkest red are the ones that are in most need and would most benefit from interventions with trees. If I move to the next slide, then this one now, we've filtered down, we've moved on down through, and we've just selected a few of those areas in the city. And in this section here, we can look at saying, right, okay, we want to increase the tree canopy percentage by a given percent or to a target canopy cover. We can look at the average tree crown diameter. So the smaller the tree, the more trees we'll need to increase our canopy cover. So we can think about that. We can think about how many trees we might naturally lose as well through, it might be through climate change, through vandalism, through a poor establishment regime. So we can put a mortality rate on there. And we can give an estimate there of what the percentage canopy cover will be, what that will be in terms of hectares across the city, and how many trees we need to plant in those areas to bring it up to the thresholds that we've set there. Also within this system, if we look over down the right hand side, we can get some modeled ecosystem services benefits as well. You have to forgive me that the figures are only in dollars at the moment, but something that's being worked on. But you can see that by increasing the numbers of trees within the area, we have current monetary value in terms of ecosystem services. That's air quality, stormwater reduction, carbon interception, and something else I can't remember. It's the air quality. So that, if we were to have to pay to provide that, that would be looking at somewhere around $5.5 million. So that's probably going to be what, 3 million plus pounds, isn't it? 4 million pounds. And we can see what we'd be getting to when we model our additional tree planting and what the net benefits are there. And we can see the same for carbon as well. So if we're thinking at the moment, a lot of the emphasis is on decarbonisation, but we can show how we're going to be sequestering additional carbon by tree planting as well. And this work is feeding into the work that the city's doing. So some of you will have seen the plans around, or the initial vision of the Our Future City plan for the central Birmingham and beyond. Now, just going back to that first map of the tree equity, that actually maps the same sort of areas as the Future Parks Accelerator work, looking at environmental equity. And that was layering up also access to green space, not just trees. And this Our Future City Plan area covers a similar sort of area. So we've got those areas that are most in need out in these fringes of the city centre and running through there. And these are the areas where we're going to be focusing on looking for delivering of nature-based solutions. So that's using trees, green infrastructure to deliver climate adaptation measures. We're looking at increasing biodiversity through those measures as well, restoring urban waterways to become not destinations, but also facilitate better stormwater attenuation. A couple of examples of this that were in the document. These were just purely visualizations to show the direction that the city's trying to travel in. This is just off the back of Digbeth, but this is showing how we can incorporate green infrastructure into buildings. So using green roofs, but helps manage the amount of energy usage. It provides cooling in the summer, it provides insulation in the winter. And if we're reducing the need for cooling and heating, then you're reducing a building's overall carbon consumption through energy. Having other green infrastructure in there as well is helping deal with stormwater. Similar sort of view here around the city centre. And then this is a bit more, something that's a bit more in progress. This is parts of Digbeth. So we've got the River Ray here running through, heavily channelized into this between buildings. And we've also got Digbeth High Street. So anybody who's been down Digbeth High Street recently will know that there's a lot of work going on down there. So we've got the Ray Valley Urban Quarter supplementary planning document, which is setting out the city's vision on how we're going to be looking to encourage developers and through our own works, integrate new green infrastructure into the city centre. This is about providing a much more livable environment for the new cities or the new residents who are going to be living in these areas, because it's moving away from some of that light industry through to more co-living workspaces, more mixed use occupation. So breaking out the channel of the River Ray will help increase stormwater capacity, but it also provides a much needed recreational space right in the heart of the city centre. The same goes for looking at Digbeth High Street. This is work that's ongoing with the Metro. This was a very early image, so it might not look exactly like that, but you can see how we've started to try and increase the numbers of trees in there, look at increasing the amount of green infrastructure, reducing the number of vehicle movements in there, so creating a better multimodal space. So yeah, we've reallocated road space within there to Metro, to walking, to cycling, to green infrastructure, creating places to stop and rest along that way. So hopefully trying to create a much more pleasant environment, and one that people will be able to use for recreation, leisure, and enable them to connect through to other green spaces close by. That was a bit of a gallop through. I think that, I don't know whether that was 15 minutes or not, but it's probably not far off. So I think on that, I'll stop screen sharing and we'll know whether we need to go into the breakout room.
Simon, thank you so much. A hugely interesting presentation and very informative too. Ellie, can I go to you now? Can you explain what's going to happen at this stage, please?
Yeah, I'm just setting up the breakout rooms, so it should automatically just take you there. I'm setting up to end automatically after 20 minutes. Actually, it should be 19 now because we've got a touch over. And yeah, you should just go there. So
Ellie, are we going to have a 20-minute breakout room, then come back into the main room?
Yeah.
And then have another breakout room after some feedback? Is that
no, so we're just going to have them in one block. So one question after another, and I'll do an announcement that will pop up in all the rooms when it's time to move along to the next question. So I'll send you there now, and discuss the two questions, and I'll let you know when it's time to move on to the next one. So I'm going to click it, and then people will probably go in trips and drabs, okay? Everybody that's still here, you should have been invited to join one of the rooms. Chris, are you there? And Patrick?
just going to share my screen. Right. Well, that looks like it's worked.
Brilliant, thank you.
Good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for having us. We are from Ricardo Energy Environment. We're an environmental consultancy that do a range of things from climate and carbon modelling through chemical risk hotlines, air quality, and waste management. So Alice and I are here to tell you about the exciting project we're doing with the city, which is to develop a total waste strategy for the city. I'm Lorna Pannett and I'm an associate director at the company, and I've got 25 years experience doing waste strategies for local authorities, helping with objective setting and developing deliverable and sustainable, ambitious strategies. So we're looking forward to this. And Alice is one of our senior consultants, and she's project manager for this project, and will be responsible for making sure that we get everything delivered and that we end up with an amazing strategy at the end of it. So I'm going to pass over to Alice, who's going to tell you a bit about what do we mean by a total waste strategy and why we're doing it, basically. Thanks, Lorna. Yeah, so the total waste strategy will set out the vision for how waste will be managed in Birmingham for the next 30 years, so until 2050. The strategy won't just look at local authority collected waste like previous ones have done, but at all of the waste generated in Birmingham. So that means households, businesses, construction sites, hospitals, so on. And the strategy will focus on waste prevention all the way through to treatment. In recent years, there's been a significant change in the national policy and legislation related to waste. A new national policy document that impacts waste management in Birmingham is the Resources and Waste Strategy for England, which was published in 2018. The Resources and Waste Strategy sets quite a few ambitious targets. That's to send no food waste at all to landfill by 2030, to recycle 65% of municipal waste by 2035, no more than 10% of municipal waste to landfill by 2035, have zero plastic waste by 2042, zero avoidable waste of all kinds by 2050, and to double resource efficiency by 2050. This timeline here also shows a few of the shorter term targets for the next 5 years or so. And there's also an increased focus on extended producer responsibility in the Resources and Waste Strategy, and holding producers accountable for the disposal of the waste they produce when it gets to the end of its life. So why do we need a new strategy? In addition to England's new Resources and Waste Strategy, there's been an increased focus in recent years on circular economy and net zero carbon. So for those who don't know what those are, circular economy aims to gradually dissociate growth from the consumption of limited or finite resources. That's in contrast to our take, make, waste, or dispose linear model that we currently have. So there's a comparison in the bottom of the slide there. As you're no doubt aware, there's growing concern around greenhouse gas emissions and their impact on the climate. Net zero is the phrase used to describe the target of balancing emissions of carbon dioxide by removing it from the atmosphere or by not producing the emissions in the first place. This includes all greenhouse gases, by the way, as a carbon dioxide equivalent rather than just carbon dioxide itself. And decarbonisation refers to reducing the amount of carbon produced in relation to a certain activity in order to reduce its impact on the climate. So in a local context, the West Midlands Combined Authorities Circular Economy Route Map sets out their vision for a circular economy, which includes optimising resources through focusing on their 3 priority areas, which are circular manufacturing, circular construction, and circular food. And even more locally, Birmingham City Council declared a climate emergency on the 11th of June 2019 and made the commitment to reduce the city's carbon emissions and to become net zero by 2030. And the ways in which the city's waste is managed will play a large part in moving towards this target. The waste hierarchy is a concept that's existed for quite a while, but still underlies the way in which we manage our waste. So the waste hierarchy ranks waste management options according to what is considered best for the environment. So shown in the image in the top right. The top priority is given to preventing waste in the first place. The next best is preparing it for reuse. If you can't do that, recycling is your next best option. If that's not feasible, you can go down the route of other recovery, which is where energy from waste sits. And then the lowest priority option is disposal, which should only be used when all other management options have been ruled out. And then all of this has to be done in the context of the growing population of the city. So housing growth forecasts have increased even more since the current waste strategy was produced, and the new strategy will need to reflect this. It's worth also noting that this is not a sustainability or net zero strategy, although as you can see, these elements do link, and that's one of the reasons this total waste strategy is being produced. The total waste strategy will work together with the West Midlands Combined Authority Circular Economy route map and Birmingham's energy strategy to address how these and the changes in national policy and even in public opinion around the environment will interlink with the city's waste management and how the system can be designed so that all of these elements coexist in a way that is sustainable for Birmingham. And now I'll pass over to Lorna to talk about our approach to the waste strategy.
Okay, so the way we work on strategy development is to ask basically just 3 questions. The first question being, where are we now? The next question being, where would we like to be? And the third question being, how do we get there? Where are we now? That's actually where we are now in terms of delivering this project with the city, understanding what the baseline is, what current strategies and policies are, understanding the current data. So it's relatively easy to get a handle on the local authority collected waste. That's captured, it has to be captured, and that information is put into national databases. We also need to understand the waste that's being generated and collected by the private sector and universities and hospitals and all of those different waste generators across the city, and also to understand what the infrastructure is that's currently available, both for handling, treating and reusing any materials that are generated. So that's the sort of data collection piece. We also need to understand what's in train as far as we can, what's got planning permission, what's coming forward in the pipeline. Once we understand where we are, we really need to understand where do we want to be. And that's about setting vision, about setting level of ambition. Do we want to be the best in the world, the best in the country, the best metropolis? Do we just want to be consistent with bare minimum get away with we can in terms of being legally compliant? So there's that level of where do you want to be, and given the complexity of the system, how practical and deliverable is that? And there's certainly stakeholder input involved in that. Where would we like to be? And it's great to be able to have this session with you guys right here at the beginning of this project to get your views on where you would like to be and what you think Birmingham should look like at the end of this strategy, which it's a long way out. I mean, 20-30 years from now, if you think back 30 years, the amount that how we do stuff, the kind of waste we produce. I mean, we definitely 30 years ago didn't have phones, in our hands. So there's a huge amount that would change over the period of this strategy. But this gives us the opportunity to be ambitious, if that's what the city wants to do. And once we've understood where you want to get to, the next question is, how do we get there? What are the solutions? What are the options? What can we pull on in terms of international best practice or UK best practice? Are there any clever and innovative things already happening in the city that we should be building on? And that builds in all of that circular economy, sharing economy stuff, and the net zero piece. Burning plastic, is that the best way forward for a net zero world? All of those kind of questions. And also behaviour change, because actually, all the citizens of Birmingham, whether they work in the city or whether they live in the city or both, whether they're just visitors, need to be part of any journey around waste management, because it's requires everybody to do their part to achieve the best that we can achieve. So how do we make it easy for citizens to take part in the system, and what might those things look like? So that's the sort of the third part of the strategy, is how do we get there and how do we make that happen over that time period. So it's probably worth just noting that we're not developing this in a complete waste management vacuum. So there is an existing municipal waste strategy, with municipal waste being essentially the waste collected by the local authority. And this vision for Birmingham that's set out in that strategy, which goes to 2040, is very tied to the waste hierarchy. So Alice has just explained, that reducing waste is at the top and landfill is at the bottom of that hierarchy. And this vision very much sits in that space, with the piece at the bottom that the people who live here play their part in sharing the environmental, economic and social benefits from viewing waste as a resource and getting the value back from that material. It's an absolute, shame to have material that comes straight out of the ground. We use it once and put it straight back into the ground. So giving Birmingham the opportunity to utilise and get the value of that resource is important, and that's already in the municipal strategy. So is that right to take forward into the total waste strategy for the city, with targets to reduce the amount of waste generated per person, 70% recycling relative to today's rate, which is closer to 30% or possibly even 20%, certainly not at 70%, although it does depend on how you define recycling, and eliminating waste to landfill. Birmingham's already meeting the national objective to have less than 10% of waste going to landfill. So that's where we are now, that's where we are today. And so we've now got an opportunity. I think we've got a question in plenary to talk about this, and then we've got the breakout rooms. So hopefully we can have a good discussion on what do we think waste should look like in the future for Birmingham.
Thank you so much, Lorna and Alice. That was really, really helpful. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Shea, who's going to facilitate a short discussion now, and then we'll go into breakout room. So in about 15 minutes, John.
Okay, that's fine. Just say to everybody, I was told I was doing this about 10 minutes ago, so I'm coming to this fairly unprepared on what's in my head. So really, I'll pick up issues you guys want to raise, but I think we need to look at how do we get people to reduce the amount they consume and the amount that therefore goes into what I will continue to term our waste stream, where we send it thereafter is perhaps a different argument, but goes into our waste stream. If we're going to move beyond energy recovery, which I think we're quite open to doing, what do we then do with the residual waste that we're going to have? What does that mean for collection and disposal of our waste? And how do we take people who are not on this call, who are not engaged in this way, on this journey? Because that's a vast part of our city. Aldi commented in our breakout room on sort of the liberal elite that we are talking about trees and greenery, and I think to external perception that's how a lot of people see us. So how do we take people with us on this? But I'm here to listen and engage. So over to you guys, I think.
John, Jules has got his hand up. I don't know if you can
see. I can't see, so might be help on that.
Thanks, Councillor Zafar. In terms of engagement, anybody who knows me and other colleagues from CanWM knows that we're pretty unimpressed with the way that the council does this from a cultural point of view, systemically, in terms of how it engages with the population of the city. And by any third-party benchmarks, you probably score about 1 out of 5. So please, going forward on this topic and many others, recognise that the council has a way to go on its whole approach to public participation in creating policy and making decisions about where resources go. So that's the first point I want to make. On a practical note, when the Route to Zero task force was operating and waste and other topics were hotly debated, we and many other people were promoting the practical application of what is the council policy for ward forums. So you have elected representatives of local communities, and your policy says that they will try and engage with their electorate, the citizens of the city who pay for everything, on matters of import, and you don't do it. So the offer still stands. We and other people who know about all kinds of topics of interest from the environmental point of view and the political point of view stand ready and willing to help create the frameworks that would support councillors running meaningful public participation through the ward forum mechanism and others. So
Thank you.
Offers on the table.
Thanks, Jules.
Thanks, Jules.
John, we've got a few hands. So
Oh, yeah, I can see James is up next. I'm going to go through the order I can see on my list there. So I see James, Tim, Richard, and Emma. So go in that order if we can. By the way, I can see that comments are being added to the Jamboard by the speakers or by one of the team. So they are being retained. So, James.
Yeah, okay. I'd just like to, I know this, it's not very practical, but you know, you can, there's always lots of, there's always difficulties in people sort of trying to reduce scope in these things. I'd just like to say that I'd be all for going for, the question was raised about what's the level of ambition. I'd say, be ambitious. Make Birmingham a centre of excellence of the circular economy. And yeah, I'm just putting that out there as a sort of encouragement.
Thanks, James. Tim.
The point I would like to make is that every shopping bag we take out of a store or a shop, all those contents will be thrown away sooner or later. And that's pretty alarming, but it's all because of this business of economic greed or economic growth that our society seems to depend upon, and which is so utterly unsustainable. We're so wasteful, we can't make things last, and so much can be composted. So I'm a guerrilla gardener and have been for decades. So I compost as much as I possibly can and then use it in my guerrilla gardening schemes around the Black Country. And I would urge other people to do that. And we've somehow got to stop buying stuff. It's dreadful the way that we just destroy things which are perfectly good to be used. You know, we've destroyed about 100 kilometers of our railway lines in Birmingham and the Black Country. What a waste after 100 years of such a success. We just build on them. And now we're destroying our railway lines and our bus routes for trams. Now that is waste, and it's immoral. Absolutely immoral. We've got to mend our ways and stop spending so much. We really have, because we are destroying ourselves with all this overpopulation, overconsumption, and overproduction of stuff which eventually gets just chucked out. Ridiculous. We've got to start waking up and understanding that we're making things worse, and this really is an emergency. Our foolish, unsustainable society, which cannot go on forever and a day, because it's unsustainable, as well as killing ourselves in the process. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I see Richard, I think, is next.
Yep, thanks. Two quick points, both about the question of public engagement. The first is about ward forums. I was delighted just to see a minute ago, Liz Clements has organised a ward forum on climate. Well, lucky her, because that's not the case for most ward forums across the city. There's a false division being created and reinforced, which is that ward forums are about super local things. It's a parking, HMOs and so on, important, but it excludes from the agenda crucial issues which are not just local, and climate is obviously one of them. So I'd urge the councillors to start a process, maybe bringing together 2 or 3 wards at a time, have regular local ward forums on climate. Second issue is what happens to all the points and proposals that are made in this meeting? Because the problem is this, the assemblies only take place 3 times a year. We have 2 issues in each. There are more than 6 issues actually for us to discuss in these meetings. That means that we probably won't get another discussion about this issue for another year, and that's useless. So we have to have a much better, more regular, more frequent system of public participation in ideas, finding out what the response to them is, and getting that feedback back to our public discussions, not a year later, but at least I'd say 3 months is long enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. I think I saw my ward colleague, Councillor Harmer, on this call. So I'm going to suggest that he and I get together and we will hold. I don't know if we'll get in for the elections, so presuming we are both re-elected, or what at least one of us is, we will hold a ward forum on climate change. How about that's commitment from me? So we'll do that. We'll pick up what it has done, and we'll steal that one. Yep.
Brilliant.
Okay, Roger's agreed. That's fine.
Tell the rest of the councillors.
I can't make councillors do stuff. If I
No.
could,
No, can we,
it is like
unfortunately.
herding cats. But you know, if you live in Birmingham, you will have a ward councillor. So ask them why they're not discussing it.
I've done that.
Yeah, I can't make your councillor do things.
Of course not.
Believe me, if I could, my life would be a lot easier. But that's a fair point. So we'll arrange that, and so I don't know when we sort it out before the election, but we'll get that arranged certainly. Okay, Richard. I think Emma's up next.
Yeah, I guess obviously, Councillor O'Shea, you can't force them to do anything, but you can definitely be modelling what they could be doing better, like replying to letters. Somebody saying people don't even reply to letters. So I've got a few comments. One of the things is that there's this massive focus on how do we make people change their behaviour, and I think a lot of the issue that we've got to consider. I'm sorry, it's late. A lot of the issue, and I've been working all day. A lot of the issue you've got to consider is that you need to reduce the waste before it even gets to that end point of being in people's bins. Obviously, we do need people to dispose of their waste responsibly, and we do need to encourage them to be doing that. But there are things that we could be doing as a city that would reduce waste earlier on than that. One of those things, and this is just one idea off the top of my head of somebody who is not an expert, is having a local bottle deposit return scheme. You know, there's no reason why a company or part of the council can't set that up and it be an opt-in thing. A lot of people would want to take part in that because they know that it would be beneficial. If we can be modelling that kind of behaviour, then that can grow and increase. And if we can make it financially beneficial, then more people will want to take part in it. My second comment is about food waste and why we don't have, I mean, Birmingham doesn't even have food waste collection. And that's appalling, really. That is so much waste that could be used for composting. But it's not being done. And look, just to respond to Lorna in the chat, it is likely there'll be a national deposit return scheme. But if you looked at on your own slide, it said that was going to come in 2019. It's now 2022 and it hasn't happened. So I think we should be leading that as a city because the government aren't doing it. Anyway, So why don't we have industrial composting? We could be getting some of the energy that we're currently relying on from Tyseley, we could be getting from anaerobic digestion and industrial composting, but we're not doing that. We're not even collecting people's food waste. And so instead it's causing unbelievable amounts of carbon emissions by going through Tyseley. Tyseley is literally like almost 1 ton in, 1 ton of waste in, 1 ton of carbon out. Like, it is unbelievably bad for the environment. And we just can't afford to keep emitting that level of carbon. And I also want to comment a little bit more on Tyseley in terms of the statistics that are being used for the recycling rates by this Ricardo consultancy, is that from the statistics that I've read, we are the second worst, or at least we were a couple of years ago, the second worst local authority in the country for recycling rates, second only to Westminster. And a lot of those statistics are including the ash from Tyseley, that the only thing it can be used for, is putting in underneath our roads. We don't need that. That's a finite thing. There's a finite amount of use you can make out of that, and it's downcycling that waste that should be being recycled and recycled and recycled and recycled, but instead it's not. That's not happening. And I just think the fact that you've given this presentation and not even talked about the plan for the incinerator is shocking, because it cannot continue. I think the other thing, I just want to very quickly come back on something that Tim said about guerrilla gardening, and that was we've also got a lot of unused land in Birmingham, and there's no reason why that can't be, at least temporarily, given to local communities in order for them to green it themselves. You know, there are local community groups who are interested in doing that and interested in growing food on unused land, and at the moment it's not doing anything, and it's degrading because there's nothing planted on it. So, you know, that is something that the council could very easily do. You know, you could find a local group, you could give them a contract to say that they can use this land for planting for X amount of time, and then they must return it to the council. And, you know, that captures carbon, it improves the local environment. It's basically beneficial, but for nothing, without really any cost. I'll stop.
Thanks, Emma. I know I'm going to get kicked by Wazim. We don't get out of 25 past. I do have to say just one correction. Our nationally reported stats on recycling do not include the bottom ash from the incinerator. Okay, we include it in our local stats. We think it is recycled and reused, but the national stats do not include that. They would look rather better if we did.
But it is included in your local stats.
Yes, but the national stats which you are drawing upon to put in the bottom two do not include that.
Well, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, well, in Wales they include it because they work different stats.
Doesn't mean they should.
But I think we should, because I think it's recycled. But not will have the argument. So I know we've got people to talk. We're probably going to get time to get Liz in next, I think. We're going to have to go have a hard ending at 25 past. So, Liz, fast as you like, please.
I can see that John Newsom wants to come in, and people have heard enough of councillors banging on. So, John, go ahead. I'll cede my time to him.
Oh, I was.
You see the floor, John.
Hey, can you hear me? If there are
yes, can hear
ward forums, then I think those ward forums need to be asked what should be the aim of the council's waste strategy, because I do not believe that it has an aim at the moment, and I don't accept that the aim is the waste hierarchy. If it is, then we've done something terribly, terribly wrong, because you are indeed at the bottom of the recycling league. So all the other local authorities in the country are doing something right that Birmingham is not doing right, and we need to find out as soon as possible what that actually is. The Tyseley plant does not recover energy, it destroys resources and turns them into pollution.
John?
Which one?
O'Shea.
Yes.
Can I just say, just very quickly, I mean, I as I said in the chat, I have used, we've had a ward forum where we discussed the climate emergency. Likewise, we've had a number of discussions in our local ward forum Bourneville and Cotteridge about the Birmingham Transport Plan and active travel, and they're great discussions, but they reach so few people. So I can still have those discussions and then go out and be told that I'm engaged in a war on cars, by people who live, in leafy Bourneville. So we've got to think of some other ways of engaging people. John knows, how strongly I feel about the incinerator, and my feeling that it doesn't fit into the future, of a zero carbon city. And so, I don't want to waste people's time with that. I mean, my views on that are fairly well known in the council, I think. But in terms of engaging people and getting them to actually think about how much they are consuming and recycling, we've got a massive job on our hands. And a ward forum is just not a way to do it. And lots of our engagement structures, like some of our tenant engagement structures in social housing, they again reaching they're worthy structures, but they reach a really small number of people. And we've got to think about some more exciting inclusive ways of doing it. I mean, I haven't got the answers, but I just think formal council-centric meetings are not the way. And I speak as somebody who used to run those sort of meetings when I worked for the council. So I think we need your ideas to move forward on that and get the message out to as many people as possible.
Thank you, Liz.
I would
John,
concur,
thank you.
but no,
Thank you
back
so
to you,
much.
Lizzie.
Right. We don't want to stop the conversation. We're just going to continue this conversation with a couple of questions in the breakout room. So there'll be another half an hour of discussion around the future of the waste disposal in Birmingham. But we just wanted to get some questions in the plenary and some comments to ensure that that can fuel some of the discussion in the groups. So Ellie will now hopefully send us into breakout rooms. So we'll be there for the next half an hour over 2 questions. Ellie, over to you.
Yep, I'll just allocate you now. This time I've made sure the time is correct, so you'll stay there for both questions, and we'll be coming back at about 5:02 to wrap up. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Amit, which room were you chairing? Because I need to reassign you manually. Amit, were you room 2? Welcome back, everyone. I hope that went okay. I could see the Jamboard getting more and more full as I was watching it, which was quite interesting. I just want to answer a few questions quickly before I hand over to Ellie Smith to wrap up. A few people have been asking about recording. This should be, once this ends and I get the recording, I'll request for it to be uploaded onto the council system. And once they've done that, I'll circulate the link. So bear with me because I have to wait for them to process it and everything. There's also been some questions about how we're going to respond to the questions. So after tonight, tomorrow, I'll collate a Word document with all the questions, and then I'll ask the relevant people to get answers to those. And then once I've collected all the answers, then I'll circulate those as well. But again, please bear with, because I might need to ask different people depending on what project it relates to and so on. So just rest assured that I will be doing that, and I will get it to you once it's done. I just want to make sure I get the best answers that I can. But yeah, so I'll pass on to Ellie Horridge-Smith, who's our new Assistant Director for Route to Zero, to wrap up the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. And given the late time and the quantity of discussion that we've had, I just really wanted to say, obviously on kind of behalf of Councillor Bazim, who's had to kind of leave early, unfortunately. Obviously, we're really, really grateful for your participation, for all of the comments and observations, which hopefully I certainly from my group have captured as much of that as I possibly can. And obviously we can kind of take that on board and try and kind of respond positively. I think just to kind of pick up on kind of one point around the discussion on waste, I think when we'd talked about kind of the request to kind of bring this as a subject matter to the Community Assembly, we felt actually we would want to come back again and talk about it as the kind of piece of work moves on a bit further. So I think in terms of kind of a next discussion, I think maybe not the next one, but perhaps the one after that, when we can actually bring some more feedback to you and an opportunity to engage. But obviously we'd be interested in your feedback on that particular point. But yes, thank you very much for obviously bearing with us. It's been quite a kind of long session, which is difficult to do, I appreciate, in a computer format. But we really do appreciate you staying for the kind of full conversation, and obviously hope that you can join us for the next session, which I think is, I'm not sure the exact date, but I think might be kind of late kind of May or early June time. But thanks again for bearing with us today, and thank you again for your really valuable contributions, and have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
You. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.